This is the Sales Babble Podcast, episode 302, How to Find Great Leads at Conferences, an interview with Megan Powers.
Welcome to Sales Babble, the podcast that shares selling secrets for non-sellers. And now your host, Pat Helmers.
Hello, Sales Babblers. This is Pat Helmers, and again, Happy New Year to you. This is the first full week of 2020, and we're excited to introduce a new sponsor, Sales Nexus. If you recall, last year in episode 295, Craig Klein was a guest and talked about selling automation. His company so enjoyed the experience, they decided to show up every week with a Sales Nexus sales tip. Sales Nexus is a way to generate leads, stay in touch automatically, and manage sales all in one. This tip is a perfect match for this week's topic. Our guest is Megan Powers of the Making a Marketer podcast, and we babble ways to find leads at conferences and trade shows, plus the most productive ways of obtaining qualified leads when exhibiting. So with no further ado, let's get to it. Welcome, Megan. Are you ready to babble?
I am. Thanks for having me, Pat.
How you been? I haven't seen you for a few weeks.
I know, really good. I've been busy. That was the first of 3 conferences I attended within a 4-week time period or 5-week time period.
We should probably tell everybody it was the Podcast Movement Conference, which I think I've mentioned on the podcast that I was at an event that I had attended it, and it was really a terrific event. I learned so much.
I did too. I'm having a hard time though with everything that I learned from the last 3. I need to really sit down and gather up all the good bits that I learned from each of them. Because in my experience, if I try to use it all, I will use none of it because I'll feel overwhelmed. So if I have a few takeaways from each of them that I can execute on pretty quickly, then I'm more successful with the education part.
Yeah, I agree with that. So what I did when I got out of that conference was I took a whole bunch of notes that weekend. I did it right then and there. And I came up with an action plan, and I apologize. You can hear the train behind me here. It's
I couldn't.
Yeah, it's really loud. So, but anyway, it was really great meeting you. You and I bumped into each other 3 times at that conference and sat and talked about all kinds of things in marketing and sales and stuff like that. And you and I had a lot of alignment. Maybe very briefly, you could share a little bit about your background.
Yeah. So I have done a wide variety of things. I have a bachelor's in English and a master's in communication. I'm a writer at my core, and have been a technical writer, marketing communications manager, and I sold audiovisual production. So I like to say that I was an accidental salesperson because I could plan events, and I got asked if I would be willing to plan events for this venue, and it turned out it was a sales job. So I was planning events, but really I was selling them the product that it was an indoor kart racing facility.
Accidental. I think the vast majority of the people end up in sales that way. Very few people. I mean, every so often you bump into somebody who's been doing lemonade stands since they were 3 years old, but the vast majority of us was not on the top of mind when we went to school. Right.
Well, and what I came to understand is that I loved events even more from having that job, and so I also ended up in the events industry on accident. But then when I look back, really, I planned my first event. In 6th grade, I planned a dance-a-thon for the Jerry Lewis Telethon at my church. And so when I kind of look back, it's I have really been planning events for a long time. So so I just I moved from that venue to event production company to a large audiovisual production company, and kind of on from there. So, and it's funny that we kept running into each other, because really at the heart of what I want to talk about today is that fact that most of my success in business and the friends that I've made in business and sales as a result are from people I met face to face at events.
You know, I loved working trade shows and I love working conferences, and you can use them both ways as both a vendor and just an attendee, which is, I think, the main reason why when you and I were there, I was saying, well, I'd like to get you on the podcast because that's something we haven't really talked a lot at great length.
Yeah.
So maybe you could start with what are some of the things that you found that have been working for you when it comes to working events?
So, well, I mean, at the heart of it is to be prepared, to not just show up. I mean, serendipity definitely happens, and you have to make room for serendipity.
Yeah.
But be prepared. Know who. If you have access to an attendee list, that's ideal, right? So I always looked at that attendee list and then try to figure out. And it's different. Like when I was attending as a salesperson, than like Podcast Movement, I was attending to learn and meet people, but there wasn't an end to like, I'm trying to make a sale. Whereas when I was in the meetings and events industry selling, my sole purpose was to meet people who I would have an opportunity to do business with. So yeah, so I would just figure out who's going to be there, and I would create a hit list of who I wanted to meet up with.
Did that work out for you?
Yeah, well, and sometimes reach out in advance of that, like, and say, hey, I see you're going to be at MPI WEC. Could we have coffee? And then and I would get those meetings, not all the time, but even in those meetings, I still wouldn't try to sell them. It was just about getting to know them and and sharing what I do. And then it's a matter of like, they know, they're not dumb. Like they get that this is what I do. But it depends on your industry too, because sometimes, there's long sales cycles. And so in this case, a lot of people have 2 to 3 year contracts with audiovisual companies. So sometimes I wouldn't even get a chance at the business for a year or 2 or 3. But that's why relationship marketing or networking building is so important, because if you approach it from a relationship standpoint and not from a sales standpoint, and you're a good person who it's that whole know, like, trust thing, right? People want to do business with people they know, like, and trust. And so you just gotta build a foundation somewhere. And so if you're lucky enough to work for an employer or for yourself where you're able to have that longer cycle, then I think face-to-face, networking, relationship building is the best approach.
You see, I think all selling goes pretty slow, and I think a lot of people are always trying to rush it, and then they'll complain that I lost that deal. The thing is, if you do things really, really slowly, you never quite lose these deals. They just haven't come to life yet. They've not come to fruition yet.
Right.
So sometimes it takes 6-7 months. When I was doing enterprise sales, sometimes things would take 2 years. So I think that's really important. So you'd have a list that you would work. What's another thing that you would do?
Well, I would figure out, I created a schedule of education sessions that I was going to attend, and not based on what I wanted to learn, but based on where my customers were going to be. And I get there early.
Right.
And try to be strategic in picking the table. It's always a gamble, right? But kind of try not to be too stalkery, walking around looking at name tags, so, and I would just kind of chat up the people at the table beforehand. Sometimes if you're lucky enough, the session allows for you to also engage with each other. You're not just getting talked to. But yeah. And then always exchange cards at the end. And then you have that, I met you here. It was great to chat with you in X session, and maybe even reference something that we learned, so it's not just so again, it's that seed, you're planting seeds to grow that relationship.
So there's something you said I really want to make sure we get clear. You're not pitching when you meet them, right?
No.
Why don't you pitch them?
Because I think I every time I felt like I would try to do that, I felt like a salesperson, and I never liked feeling like a salesperson. And that might sound bad to your listeners, but for me, I always just felt like I was helping people. And whenever someone made me feel like a salesperson, it kind of gave me the heebs. So again, it's about building that relationship. And if you try to sell someone right away, you're totally going to turn them off.
How do you convert them into customers? So let's say, you exchange business cards. What happens after the event?
Well, it kind of obviously depends. And I like my crowning achievement, my biggest feather in my cap example is Oracle. And I was invited to have lunch. And it was at the conference, like it wasn't a special lunch, but to lunch with these two planners who I'd gotten invited by this woman who worked at the San Diego Convention Center and had done business with them before. And again, they didn't have any business for her, but she's just keeping that relationship alive. So, let's have lunch. And she invited me, and we just, we got to talking, and they said, oh, how many concurrent breakouts have you ever done? Your company, meaning like education sessions going on at the same time. So in other words, as an audiovisual company, you have to be able to provide gear and be able to run so many rooms all at the same time. Which, takes a lot of organization and all that kind of good stuff. And so, we had a conversation about that, but I did not think much of it. But I did do my follow-up after. I have sort of a drip approach, which is I always send a handwritten note. I try to get it out within 48 hours for anyone that I've had a conversation with who I, would like to follow up with. Actually, even people who don't have business for me, I would still write a handwritten note. And I always was told that stands out, right? Like real mail is kind of unheard of anymore. So
I did get a note after we met. I guess you didn't follow up with me, I guess. I
told you times have changed, man. And it's so funny because I knew you were going to say that. Hilarious. But and then the next step would be like, once I know they've received it, LinkedIn invite, and then follow-up email. And then from there, it kind of just depends on the exchange and what else happens. But it might just be, the next touch might be when I see them again at the next conference, and then I already know them, and it's, hey, can I buy you a drink? Or do you want to come to dinner with us? There's a group of us going to dinner tonight, or whatnot. But the Oracle thing was beautiful because I made a good enough impression, apparently, that I had sent the note, but I hadn't done anything else yet. And I got an RFP in my email.
Oh my goodness.
Just about died. It was a huge account. Huge. It was major. So that was pretty exciting.
I hate RFPs. In fact, we just talked about them on this podcast about 3 weeks.
I listened to it. Yeah. No, I know. But it's so hard. It's so hard. Like, I mean, and I appreciated everything he had to say and the ideas for ways around it. But like with a company like Oracle, there's just no way. There's procurement. Like there's so many layers with an organization that big that it's just impossible to do anything on a, handshake or whatever. But I think that the key, though, with RFPs is that a salesperson, and here's the thing, I'm a buyer now, and there are a lot of terrible salespeople out there. And the key to responding to an RFP is to ask questions. Not everything is going to be able to be covered in there. And if you're doing your job right, you're calling them, you're asking them questions, you're engaging with them throughout the process so that, again, they understand that you care about what you're delivering to them, that you begin to gain trust. If you're asking the right questions, and then you can, then hopefully, if you did it right, your proposal will stand out because you've covered so much more maybe than somebody that you're going up against. I have requested quotes from companies that build trade show booths. And this is I wrote a blog post about it. It was the worst experience because I reached out to them. Like they didn't even have to try for the sale and they still were awful about getting back to me. and giving me what I was asking for. I didn't have an RFP. I didn't email. There was like very clear list of things that I was looking for. And again, the person that's got the business, the person that stood out is the person who got back to me right away and had a whole bunch of questions for me. And she got on the phone with me. I gave the others an opportunity to have a call with me, and no one else took me up on it.
It's not uncommon. I don't know how many contractors I've had to deal with who just wouldn't follow up.
Oh, well, that's an industry that's notorious for.
You would think they would want more business. You would think.
You would. Yeah, you would.
I don't get it. I don't understand it, and I never will.
Mm-hmm.
What about working as a trade show booth?
What about it?
Have you done that?
Yeah. So here, I'll share real quick. I did my master's thesis on face-to-face versus online communication within the context of trade shows. So very specific, but I wanted to do meetings or conferences as a whole, but it was too big. I didn't have enough time. So I interviewed executives in charge of budgets, exhibitors who may or may not be salespeople, right? They might be marketing folks, event organizers, and attendees who may or may not be buyers. And those are the people that I surveyed. I didn't interview them. I surveyed them. And then I did an autoethnography, which is my experience having served in every one of those roles and kind of what came through each of those things. And one thing that rang through the survey is that executives, the bosses, have very different opinions about the value and what comes out of a trade show than the salespeople do, or the exhibitors. So
really,
yeah. So I had several people several execs that said, well, we just have to be there. It's just, it's political. Our competitors are there. It's just FaceTime. I don't really expect to get any business out of it. Which is why I'm like, oh, well, maybe that's why so many leads don't get followed up on, because their executives aren't holding them accountable. Something like 70 to 80% of leads acquired at a trade show are not followed up on.
I believe that.
Insanity. I believe that. To somebody who's a marketer and who used to sell, like it drives me bonkers. So, but then that to me begs the question, what is success? And at what point do you determine that? So
what did the salespeople, but before we move to that, could you tell me what were the expectations of the salespeople at these events?
They really like the opportunity to be able to, gather leads and see their customers and prospects in this kind of an environment. And they do believe that it's successful. And that's the point I was just going to get to is that.
Well, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. So what is success? First of all, when do you determine, what is that executive's idea of success? If I didn't get a sale for 2 years, but I met them at that show, there's still great value in the fact that I went to that show, because I might not have met them otherwise. You know what I'm saying? So
right. Doing
a better job of tracking, using codes, tags in your CRM for shows. And, it gets kind of hard, right? If 2 years out, that's kind of a long ways to look back. But all that to say, it's like, there's value in being there, but you do have to be prepared. Here's the other thing. 90% of the people surveyed said they go into a show prepared. Only 60% said that they're diligent about follow-up. So what's more important?
What I'm thinking is and my guess would be that they don't have a sales process that's really defined. Like, I get this .csv file of leads, right, that I scanned. I might import it into my CRM. But lots of these CRMs they're either designed for salespeople or they're designed for marketing.
Right.
And some companies do both, but mostly they're kind of like plugins to each other. They're not like seamless. So I'm assuming the salespeople really don't know how to do that kind of drip campaign marketing thing. And the marketing people aren't there. The salespeople are there.
Sometimes, but yeah.
And other times I've seen this. I've seen only marketing people there working booths who aren't particularly interested in don't know a whole lot about the thing. They
I
were
was
just
just
told
gonna
to
say,
show. They were just
yeah.
told to show up.
They don't know, their level of knowledge is not deep enough oftentimes for the person who's trying to do the purchasing.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, cause they're like, they know how to give a tchotchke away. And that's not to say, I mean, I'm a marketer, right?
Right.
So I truly try to, do a good job and make it more for me as being sort of like a business development person when I'm there, not just, handing out swag. And in fact, I get hired to work for companies to do like upfront logistics, but also to do biz dev, to plan. Like I'm the one in the app, on the website saying who's going to be there and really being prepared. So then when people walk by, well, to set up appointments too, but also when people walk by, I'm like, oh, that's that guy who was like, so we try to make sure that we, engage with him. So I think to go back to what I said before, it really is, well, there's two things. We get back to the office and you're super behind, right? So that's part of it. You've been there working, but not working. And so everything that you were working on before, you have to start doing again. So there's that. And then things kind of get lost in the shuffle. And then I think that supervisors, managers, whoever, don't do a good enough job to hold their feet to the fire. So that needs to be part of your plan. You need to have a plan of the before, the during, and the after, and what the follow-up is. And I mean, I got hired, I tried to get out of the audiovisual industry and I got sucked back in. And I got hired by this company because this is the way I sold, because this was my jam. And for me, I was like, hey, I'll travel, I'll go wherever, get me there. And I, I'm willing to do it. So if the company was willing to spend the money, then I would go. So they hired me because that was my way. And then it took about 2 minutes for them to force me to dial for dollars. It was brutal. It was kind of a bait and switch situation. I didn't last in that very long.
I want to get back to your paper, right? You said you did this was a master's dissertation or something like that?
My thesis, yeah.
Yeah. So what were the conclusions?
So that it's a combination of the two, which is what I had a feeling. It's not online or offline, because there was a period of time where companies were, trying to go virtual, trying to we can do it online. And actually, I was trying to prove a theorist wrong. There's a living theorist in the communication world who says that you can do anything online that you can do face-to-face. It just takes longer. So, and I have a whole long story that you don't have time for on this, but about how I met him in person. He ended up buying me breakfast, and then ultimately never got back to me when I followed up with him. So, and then I ran into him and I told him, hey, I quoted you and I let you know, and you didn't get back to me. So anyway, it was quite funny. But the bottom line is that because of this rich online experience, also I work in social media, right? So I get the value. I love face-to-face, but I get the value of online and email, and doing that work up front online to try to soften that intro, do the work while you're there, and then do the follow-up online. So a combination of online and offline is, and as I said before, the seeing them again, and then you continue to build those relationships, and we'll get opportunities potentially down the line, if you're patient about it. But yeah, so it's a combo deal.
When I'm meeting people at these conferences, the first thing I do is I look them up on LinkedIn. In fact, that podcast movement, that's all. They had an app. A lot of these events have an app now.
They all do. If they don't have an app, trust me, man, an app is like a website. If you don't have an app, you're falling behind. And if there's value in it, and we could do another show on that. But
yeah.
I'm just saying.
But with that said, I didn't use the app much. I pulled out LinkedIn and we were messaging each other, and a lot of us were messaging each other with LinkedIn throughout there, because then you have this thread of messages the next week, because you're never going to use that app again, in a week or two from now.
Right.
And then every day it gets staler. But LinkedIn, I'm on every day. And that's a great way I find of following up. But
Yeah.
if you connect with them on LinkedIn and then you send them an email and then maybe you would call them and then kind of repeat that cycle a few times,
Yeah.
it's easy to turn into a conversation and then do your pitch through that conversation.
Right. The best apps have social intertwined, and you can get connected through that. Also, there's an app out there. Well, there's several, but one that's called Swap Card, and they have matchmaking. So they do the work for you. So based on what you've answered, assuming you've answered these questions, right? It takes two to tango, but then it connects you with people that it thinks you should meet. So, because even people who are buying want to get, like, people don't want to be sold to, but buyers need to buy. So it's this struggle, right? This kind of push and pull. But that's a nice thing, that matchmaking element where, like, they're doing the work and you see, oh, yeah, I am going out to bid for my audiovisual production or whatever it is. And then it's telling you this person is there. And then that person can, like, kind of look you up and see kind of what your deal is, before they get there. And then there's a greater opportunity of you actually meeting in person.
I love meeting people in real life. I really do. I think it goes a long ways. You can do an awful lot on the phone. I have to admit, the vast majority of my selling has been over the telephone. But a lot of it got started at a conference. Right. That you met them, you shook their hands, and then everything else from then on was over the phone.
Yeah. So when my last year in audiovisual sales for the most prominent job that I had, 85% of the RFPs I received were because of people I met in person, and 90% of my $2.5 million book of business was from those RFPs.
A buddy of mine who I'm looking to get on the podcast made an incredible, has closed an incredible deal from just walking the trade show and just walking up and down the booths and picking up business cards and just chit-chatting with people. He was able to pick up a card and someone said, yeah, you might be a good match for us. I'm not the right guy. I'll connect you with a guy. And then a week or two later, he connected with a guy who connected with a guy who eventually connected with the right guy. And it all started from that trade show. Right.
Well, and that's one point I want to make sure that I make, is that there's great value in anyone you meet, because I've had people say, oh, they're a supplier. I don't want to talk to them. And I think that's super short-sighted, because you never know who knows who, A, and B, you never know where you're going to end up. And you may end up being in a position that person would be of great value to you, or to someone, or to your customer. Like, you could introduce someone to your customer that helps them out. So my golden rule, man, just be kind, right? And be willing to have a conversation with anyone. I think that's important.
I agree.
Which is basically why I'm not selling anymore. I have my own business. For 6 years, I've had my own business. The only client that I've had for almost 6 years, I approached because I used to work for the company. Otherwise, it's all been by referral, because of these relationships and these people I've got to know. This collateral, right, that I built over the years. This value that I showed the industry. And so that's one thing too I want to make sure that I mention, because we're just talking about face-to-face in general, but I think it's important to get involved in the professional associations that are a part of your industry. So for us, Podcast Movement is not an association, but it's a community, right? But like, yes, meeting Professionals International, I belong to, and I take it a step further and don't just attend events, which you should, but if you get involved, if you raise your hand, even just to be on a committee, to do a small job, then that gives you a reason to talk to everybody on your board who might have business for you, because they're like automatically going, okay, this person stepped up. And so there's opportunity there. But then also, if you're on the membership committee, you get an excuse to call people, get to know them via the association.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why I've been an avid volunteer for years. Before we go, I want you to share something about, you have a podcast, right?
I host 2 podcasts. I appreciate the chance to talk about it. Yeah. So Making a Marketer is podcast that I have had we just started season 3. We're recording episode 40.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. In what way?
you have 1 million people on there all at once.
Well, that was just my reunion kickoff. So what I do at the beginning of a new season is I invite as many people who were on the previous season back as are willing to come back. And then I group them to where there's synergy and whatever. And then I rotate them in and out in 20-minute increments. Yeah. So this year we had 18 people on in 2 shows.
It was fun. I listened to them.
I listened to them all. And it gave me a chance to recount the show they were on and to hope, because if somebody starts at episode 37, they've never listened before, then that tells them like, okay, these are all it gives them a little taste of what was on the season before to try to get them to go back and listen to previous episodes. Plus it's like a little family reunion. It's fun.
It is. I really enjoyed it. And a couple of those people I want you to connect with me with, because I think they'd be great on Sales Babble.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And so normally we have 1 to 3. Max has been 3 on a regular show. It just depends on the topic. And then so that one's called Making a Marketer. I don't know if I said that. Did I say that?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. But we haven't talked about the other one. I'm not familiar. Yeah.
And the other one's called Inside Events. And so it is, we do on the marketing one, because of my event industry experience, there's a lot of event focused marketing stuff on there. But now I have the show that's solely dedicated to events and everything to do with the industry. And I have, I've recorded 3 episodes. Only 2 have been published. I'm having some audio issues at the 3rd one. Which is fun. But that one's gonna be a once a month deal to start. So, but it's been really nice. And we're doing news. So talking news in the first portion, and then the person I'm on news with then helps me interview the guest. So
excellent. Well, I really want to make sure I'll put the notes up. I'll put the URLs in the show notes so that people can find you.
And my company name is Powers of Marketing, which, I use my name to the full extent as often as I can.
Megan is your superpower.
Yeah. Actually, parallel parking is my superpower, but
Us city people, we know how to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. This has been fun babbling about this. This is a topic that's really near and dear to my heart. So I've really enjoyed having you visit and talk about this.
I appreciate it. Yeah. And it's so appropriate that I met you at a conference.
Absolutely.
That's how it goes.
So where am I going to see you next? What's the next conference I'm going to see you at?
I don't know. Social Media Marketing World will be the next marketing conference that I attend.
I've never been to that.
Beginning of March.
Yeah.
They used to have a podcast track, and it went away, but I hear they might be bringing it back. So it might be something to consider. It's a really good talk about like great networking, and it's the best show I attend in terms of people.
Is that in San Diego?
Yes.
Yes.
Social Media Examiner puts it on.
Yes. Yeah. I've thought about going to that. Now that my son moved out of San Diego, I don't have much of a reason to go there anymore. But the beer's still good, and
except that it's such
the
a
beaches are so
city.
Beautiful. It's just an amazing place.
And I'm there.
I'm such a booster of San Diego too. Woohoo, San Diego. Anyway, so yes, cool. Maybe I'll go. We're getting off track here. Megan, Thanks for visiting us. Thanks for babbling with us here on Sales Babble.
Thanks, Pat. I appreciate you having me on.
Welcome back, Craig. Are you ready to babble a Sales Nexus sales tip?
Yes, sir.
So what's this week's tip, Craig?
This week's tip is know your ideal customer.
Know your ideal customer. What do you mean by that?
Well, you have to know who the big whale is versus the little minnow, right? So I always imagine, you're at a trade show or something and there's all these potential customers in the room. They're all lined up around your booth and there's a lot of them waiting to talk to someone. So how do you know who the whale is? How can you pick him out of the crowd, right? You don't want to make him wait. You don't want to waste your time with all the minnows while the whale's sitting there ready to spend some money. So to me, you've got to figure out how to profile those people. What's their industry? What are they using now? What competing solutions are they using? What's their title? And of course, the obvious things like what's their budget? To me, you want to start with these questions when you're on the phone, when you're talking to a new lead. And you want to create for yourself a helpful way to steer the minnows into the pool that's most appropriate for them so that you're wasting less time with those minnows and you can get to the whale. So in other words, hi, Mr. Customer, great to meet you. Let me ask you a couple of questions. What are you using today? And they tell you the answer. And if that tells you they're a minnow, you say, well, here, I'd like you to go over here and do this. And then you move on to the next guy in line.
Awesome. Craig, where can people go to get today's sales tip?
Just go to salesnexus.com/sales. There's a PDF, so you get all the sales tips, all of our sales tips, or all of our sales Babble sales tips.
Yeah.
You can download our 4 Steps to Market Domination guide for free.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, Craig.
Thank you.
To connect with Megan, you can find links to her podcasts at www.salesbabble.com/302, as well as Craig Klein's Sales Nexus Sales Tips. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast app and share it with your friends. We love to hear from our sales babblers, so reach out to us with any questions or comments you might have. That's all I got for today, folks. So till next Tuesday, take care and have a highly profitable and successful selling day.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Babble podcast. Find us at www.salesbabble.com.
This is a production of Habanero Media.